It's 3:47 a.m. My back seat is empty, but I can still hear her breathing. I've been driving taxis for 7 years in this city. Every night driver gets a list, 7 rules for late-night pickups. Break them, and well, 3 drivers before me ignored rule number 7. 2 disappeared completely. 1 came back different, wrong. Last Tuesday, I picked up a woman in a red dress at the corner of 5th and Main. She smiled at me through the mirror and said, "You know the rules, don't you, driver?" What I saw in that mirror, what was sitting behind me, wasn't human, and I had 6 more hours until sunrise. This is my story. These are the rules, and if you ever take a taxi after midnight, you need to know them too. My name is Marcus, and I've been driving a taxi in this city for 7 years now. 7 long years of night shifts, empty streets, and things that don't belong in the darkness. Most people think driving a taxi is easy. Pick someone up, drop them off, collect the fare. But the night shift, that's a completely different world. When the sun goes down and the city changes, you're not just a driver anymore. You become a witness to things that happen when normal people are asleep. I started driving nights because the pay was better. Double the rate after midnight, triple after 3 a.m. I needed the money, and I wasn't afraid of the dark. That was my first mistake. On my very first night, I met an old driver named Raymond. He was finishing his last shift ever, retiring after 30 years behind the wheel. I'll never forget how he looked at me in the parking lot that night. His hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette, and his eyes, those eyes had seen things. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket pocket. 7 rules were written on it in faded ink. Some of the words were smudged, like they'd gotten wet, or maybe like someone had been holding that paper with sweaty, terrified hands. Raymond grabbed my shoulder. His grip was stronger than it should have been for a man his age, and he said, "Listen to me, kid. I've seen 12 drivers come and go in my time. The ones who followed these rules, they're still alive. The ones who didn't, well, you won't find them anymore." I tried to laugh it off. I thought he was just messing with the new guy, trying to scare me. But Raymond didn't smile. He just stared at me with those haunted eyes and whispered, "Follow them, or you won't last a week." Then he walked away, got into his car, and I never saw him again. That piece of paper is still in my glove compartment. The ink is even more faded now, but I've memorized every single word. Because Raymond was right. In 7 years, I've seen 9 new drivers start the night shift. Only 2 of us are still here. Rule number 1. Never pick up a passenger standing perfectly still under a streetlight. Sounds simple, right? Almost too simple. But there's a reason it's the first rule on the list. Raymond wrote in the margins, "They're waiting for you." When you drive through empty streets at 2 or 3 in the morning, you'll see people waiting for cabs. They wave, they move around, They check their phones. That's normal. But sometimes you'll see someone just standing there under a streetlight, not moving at all, not checking their watch, not looking around, not shifting their weight, just standing, staring straight ahead. Their eyes don't follow your taxi as you approach. They don't raise their hand to flag you down. They just stand there like a statue, and somehow you know they're waiting for you specifically. I broke this rule once. Only once. It was my 3rd week on the job. I was driving down Maple Street around 2:30 a.m. The street was completely empty. No cars, no people, nothing. Then I saw her. A young woman in a business suit standing under the streetlight at the corner of Maple and 7th. She wasn't moving at all. I slowed down. Something felt wrong, but I thought maybe she was just tired. Maybe she'd had a long day at work and was zoned out. I needed the fare, so I stopped. The moment my taxi came to a complete stop, her head turned toward me, not her body, just her head. It moved too smoothly, like it was on a swivel, and she smiled. I should have driven away right then. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to hit the gas, but I didn't. I unlocked the doors. She got in without saying a word, didn't tell me where she wanted to go, just sat directly behind me, in the middle seat. I could see her in the rear-view mirror, still smiling, still not blinking. I asked her, "Where to, miss?" She didn't answer, just kept staring at me with that smile. I asked again, a little louder this time, "Ma'am, I need a destination."
Then she leaned forward, slowly. Her face got closer and closer to the gap between the front seats, and she whispered in a voice that didn't sound human, "Drive until I tell you to stop." My hands were frozen on the steering wheel. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Her breath on my neck felt like ice. I started driving. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. 10 minutes passed. 20. She didn't say a word, just breathed that cold breath on my neck and smiled in the mirror. Then I remembered the rules. Rule number 3, actually. I'll tell you about that one later, but it saved me that night. I did exactly what it said, and suddenly she screamed. Not a human scream. It sounded like metal scraping on metal, like 1,000 voices screaming at once. I looked in the mirror and she was gone. The back seat was empty. The door hadn't opened. She just vanished. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. When I got home that morning and checked my taxi, there were handprints on the inside of the rear window. Small handprints like a child's, and they were frozen into the glass. I had to replace that window. The ice wouldn't melt even after 3 days in the summer heat. That's what happens when you break rule number 1. You let something in that isn't supposed to be in our world, and once it's in your taxi, it doesn't want to leave. I've never stopped for a perfectly still passenger since that night. I've seen them dozens of times over the years, always standing under streetlights, always alone, always watching. And every single time I drive past them, I see that same smile in my rear-view mirror. But nothing prepared me for rule number 4. That one changed everything I thought I knew about this job.
Rule number 2. If a passenger asks you to turn off your headlights, refuse and end the trip immediately. This rule seemed strange to me at first. Why would anyone ask you to turn off your headlights while driving? It's dangerous, it's illegal, and it makes no sense. But Raymond had underlined this rule 3 times on that paper. 3 thick black lines, like he was trying to make sure I wouldn't miss it. In the margin next to it, he'd written 2 words: "They hunt darkness." I didn't understand what that meant until my 4th month driving nights. It was a cold October evening around 1 a.m. I picked up a businessman outside a hotel downtown. Normal-looking guy, mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. He got in, told me an address on the east side, and we started driving. Everything was fine for the first 10 minutes. He was quiet, looking at his phone. Typical passenger. Then we turned onto Highway 40, the long stretch of road with no streetlights that cuts through the industrial district. Nothing but darkness on both sides for about 6 miles. That's when he spoke. His voice was different now, lower, colder. "Turn off your headlights." I glanced at him in the mirror. He was staring straight ahead, not blinking. His phone was still in his hand, but the screen was black. I said, "Excuse me, sir?" "Turn off your headlights. I need you to turn them off, now."
My heart started pounding. I remembered the rule. I remembered Raymond's warning, but I tried to stay calm, stay professional. "I can't do that, sir. It's not safe, and it's against the law. I need my headlights to drive." He leaned forward slowly. I could feel his eyes burning into the back of my head. "I'm not asking you, driver. Turn them off, or I'll do it myself." His hand reached toward the front seat, toward the dashboard. I saw his fingers in the dim light, and they were wrong, too long, too thin, the joints bending in places they shouldn't bend. I slammed on the brakes. The taxi skidded to a stop in the middle of the empty highway. Get out of my taxi right now." He sat back slowly, those wrong fingers retreating. Then he smiled. It was the worst smile I've ever seen. Too wide, showing too many teeth. "You know the rules," he said. "Good. You're smarter than the last one." Then he opened the door and stepped out onto the dark highway. But here's the thing that made my blood turn to ice. When he stood up outside the car, he was tall, too tall, at least 8 feet, maybe more. His body stretched upward like a shadow, his limbs too long, his head tilted at an angle that would break a normal person's neck. He walked away from the road into the darkness beyond my headlights, and I swear I saw others out there, shapes moving in the blackness, tall, impossible shapes waiting just beyond the light.
I drove away so fast I left rubber on the road.
My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. When I got back to the taxi station that morning, I checked my back seat. There were scratch marks on the inside of the door handle, deep gouges in the metal like something with claws had been trying to get out, or maybe trying to keep something else from getting in. I learned something that night. The headlights aren't just for us to see the road. They're protection. They're a barrier. Those things out there in the darkness, they can't fully enter the light. That's why he wanted me to turn them off. He was trying to let the others in. Old Tommy, another night driver, told me a story once. 5 years ago, there was a driver named Phil who picked up a passenger on that same highway. The passenger asked him to turn off the headlights. Phil thought it was weird, but the guy offered him $200 cash. Phil needed the money. He turned off the lights for just 10 seconds. They found Phil's taxi the next morning, abandoned on the side of the road, engine still running, driver's door wide open. Phil was gone. They never found him. But inside the taxi, all over the seats and windows and steering wheel, there were handprints, hundreds of them, all different sizes, like a crowd of people had been pressed up against every surface. The police closed the case, called it a voluntary disappearance, but every night driver in this city knows what really happened to Phil. Remember this rule, because at 11:47 p.m. tonight, I'll need it more than ever before. Rule number 3. If you hear a child crying but see no child, turn on your radio to static and drive to the nearest church or hospital. This is the rule I mentioned earlier, the one that saved me from the woman under the streetlight. But that wasn't the first time I heard the crying. The first time was during my 2nd month on the job. I was parked outside a 24-hour diner on Riverside Avenue, waiting for a fare around 3:30 a.m. The street was dead quiet, just the hum of my engine and the buzz of the diner's neon sign. Then I heard it, a child crying, soft at first, then louder. It sounded like it was coming from the alley next to the diner. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sobbing like her heart was breaking. My first instinct was to help. Of course it was. You hear a child crying alone at 3:30 in the morning. You don't just sit there. I opened my door. But then I remembered the paper in my glove compartment, the rules. I grabbed it and read rule number 3 again under my dome light. I looked around. The street was empty. The alley was dark. There was no child, no parents, no one. But the crying was getting louder, more desperate. It sounded like she was right outside my window now. "Help me," the voice said. "Please help me. I'm scared." My hand was on the door handle. Every part of me wanted to get out and find that little girl. But something was wrong. The crying sounded off. It was too perfect, too rehearsed, like someone was playing a recording. And the voice, when it spoke, it had an echo to it, like multiple voices layered on top of each other. I pulled my hand back and turned on the radio instead, twisted the dial away from all the stations until it hit pure static. White noise filled the car. The crying stopped instantly, just cut off mid-sob like someone had unplugged it. Then I heard something else. Scratching. Something was scratching at my passenger door. Slow, deliberate scratches like nails on metal. I didn't look. The rule didn't say to look. It said to drive to the nearest church or hospital. The nearest church was St. Michael's, about 8 blocks away. I put the car in drive, static still blasting from my radio, and I drove. The scratching followed me. It moved from the passenger door to the rear door, then to the trunk, then to the roof, like something was crawling around my taxi, trying to find a way in. 4 blocks. The scratching got more frantic, more aggressive. I could hear dents forming in my roof. 6 blocks. A child's face appeared in my rearview mirror, pressed against the back window from the outside. But I was going 40 miles an hour. Nothing should have been able to keep up. 8 blocks. I saw the white cross of St. Michael's Church lit up in the darkness. The moment I pulled into the church parking lot, everything stopped. The scratching, the face in the mirror, all of it just vanished. I sat there for 20 minutes with my engine running and the static still playing. My whole body was shaking. When I finally got out to check my taxi, there were scratches all over it, deep gouges in the paint on every door, on the roof, on the hood. It looked like an animal had attacked it. But the worst part, the part that still gives me nightmares, were the handprints on the back window. Small handprints, like a child's, but they had too many fingers, 7 on each hand. I had to file an insurance claim. Told them I'd been vandalized. They believed me, because what else could have done that? But here's the pattern you need to understand. All of these things, the perfectly still passengers, the ones who want darkness, the children who aren't children, they all do the same thing. They pretend to be human. They use our instincts against us, our desire to help, our curiosity, our kindness. That woman under the streetlight, she looked like someone who needed a ride. The businessman, he seemed normal until we hit the darkness. The crying child, every decent person would want to help a scared little girl. They study us. They know exactly what will make us stop, what will make us open our doors, what will make us break the rules. And once you break the rules, once you let them in, they don't leave, not completely. I still hear that child's voice sometimes when I'm driving alone late at night. Always when I'm far from churches, far from hospitals, far from light. It whispers my name now. It knows who I am. That's when I turn on the static, and I drive until I see a cross or a hospital sign glowing in the darkness. The next rule, rule number 4, that one saved my life twice, and the second time I wasn't even in my taxi. So these were the first 3 rules, the ones that kept me alive during my early months as a night driver. But remember what I told you at the beginning. There are 7 rules on that paper Raymond gave me. The next 4 rules, They're different. They're not about avoiding danger. They're about surviving it when you can't avoid it anymore. Rule number 4, I mentioned it earlier. I said it saved my life twice, once in my taxi and once when I wasn't even driving. How does a taxi rule save you when you're not in a taxi? Because these things, they don't just stay in the taxi, they follow you home. Rule number 5 deals with the mirrors, what you see in them, and more importantly, what sees you back. Rule number 6, Raymond had scratched this one out and rewritten it 3 times, like he couldn't get the words right, like he was trying to warn me about something he could barely explain. And rule number 7, 3 drivers broke rule number 7. 2 of them disappeared completely. The third one came back, but he came back wrong. I see him sometimes at the taxi station. He doesn't talk anymore, just stares, and his eyes, they're not his eyes.
Here's what I need you to understand. These first 3 rules, they're tests. The things out there, they're watching to see if you know the rules, if you're smart, if you're worth hunting. Once you pass the tests, that's when the real game begins. Last Tuesday night, something happened. Something that made me understand why Raymond retired after 30 years. Why his hands were shaking when he gave me that paper. I picked up a woman in a red dress at the corner of 5th and Main. She wasn't standing under a streetlight. She didn't ask me to turn off my headlights. There was no child crying. She just got in, smiled at me through the mirror and said, "You know the rules, don't you, Marcus?" Nobody knows my name unless I tell them. My name isn't on my taxi. It's not on my license visible to passengers. So how did she know? Part 2 is coming soon. The next 4 rules, and the story of that woman in the red dress, because she's still in my back seat. I can hear her breathing.